Annyeong! Welcome to Delightful! Last episode on the Stockbox series we had a little technical mishap. I really wanted to show you some of the techniques I used on Iggy, so let's make another one. Her big sister, to be precise. Let's look through the box. I immediately thought to use Claudia for this project. She's got a rare smiling face mold that I think might be the only open-tooth smile doll among Monster High. So I've been saving her for a special project. Well, saving her head anyway. You may recall her big sister body type went to Flareon over there. So we've only got her head to work with. I had my heart set on giving this doll a bigger body type though, so I'm pawing through the stock box here, and the only remaining larger doll I own is Nephra. Now, she's obviously not in mint condition or anything, but the original Nephra doll is still considered a rare gem. Plus, I really like her, so I'm not sure I'm willing to decapitate and steal her body. We'll see. To the work table! I decided to modify a common Monster High doll body, so we might as well use this Rochelle Goyle. That's right, it's coming full circle. The original Claudia and Rochelle dolls will have completely switched bodies by the end of this custom. There's a lot of work in prepping the doll this time, so let's dive right in. Cut off the hair close to the head with a sharp pair of scissors. It was long enough and the color was pretty, so it was worth saving for another project. Use an object to rub the inside of the head and pull out the remaining plugs. Yuck! To match Iggy, I'll be repositioning the ears to the side of her head, so off they come. That's good enough for now. Let's transition to the body. If you aren't familiar, there are three main body types among Monster High female dolls: Big Sister, Normal, and Little Sister. My goal is to not only turn a normal doll into a Big Sister body type, but take it a step further and try to make her curvier too. To do that, we'll be using good ol' Epoxy Sculpt. Seriously, they should sponsor me, I love this stuff. Mix equal parts A and B, and then get to sculpting. I build up material around her rib cage, stomach, booty, and thighs to start. If you're trying to make a doll curvier, one thing to keep in mind is that there's no changing the joint size itself, not if you want to stay articulated. So you have to work around them in a way that looks believable. Here you can see I'm extending the width of her hips while trying to keep a functional yet minimal gap to allow the leg to move. If you try this, I would suggest frequently moving the joints around to test the limits of your modifications. Next, I give her a larger bust and continue bulking up the front and back side of the torso. The torso is always easy and fun to modify because it's just one solid piece. The arms and legs are where the joints cause the biggest problems for me. To allow a full range of motion, you can't build up epoxy close to the joints, so you can only bulk up the shapes so much until they reach what I call the pillow effect. You know, like when a kid stuffs pillows into their shirts for fake muscles or something. It looks odd and unrealistic because it gets super skinny around the elbows and shoulders. Basically, if you really want a larger, realistic body frame, you have to create bigger joints. And at that point, you might as well just sculpt the whole doll from scratch. Lengthening the legs at the upper leg seems like a good idea. Should have thought of it in the first place. So using a jeweler's saw, off they come, and I reconnect them using a sturdy wire and epoxy glue combo. Once that's cured, you guessed it, more epoxy. While more epoxy was mixed, I took the chance to modify her ears slightly. I stick a needle through the ear to act as an anchor later, then fill in the remaining gaps with epoxy. This doll is going to have huge hair, so I want the ears to stand a chance of being seen. hence extending their length. Once epoxy fully cures, it can be sanded. I sanded the heck out of this custom because I know the airbrush will bring out any imperfections in my sculpting. So dust was flying everywhere. Remember to wear a mask when you sand. I use nail files and buffers in smaller and smaller grades until the transition from epoxy to plastic is seamless. Remove the factory painted face with a couple swabs of acetone, and voila! Modification sculpting complete! I would have liked to push her proportions further, but was already dangerously close to the pillow effect at the arms there, so it's good enough. She's clearly not one body type or the other, truly worthy of the oak hashtag. Proceeding to my airbrush station, I start by coating the whole body with a primer. This should prep the surface and help color stick. Luckily, I have a color straight from the bottle that looks perfect, so I don't have to mix anything this time. It took 3 coats to become fully opaque. Don't forget to bend arms and legs around to reach hidden surfaces. Hang it up to dry in a place that will scare your neighbors and wait overnight. I used 2 coats of a mixture of water and matte varnish to protect the new color. Looking good. But the knees and elbows aren't having it. We started with a light gray base, so it's easy to spot mistakes. To combat the flaking around the joints, let's use pastel. You may be familiar with the pastels only method of body color changing, which works remarkably well around the joints, so let's see if it'll save this doll's joints. And we might as well blush the doll while we're at it. Alright, let's take her out for one final coat of Mr. Super Clear Sealant. Spray liberally and get into all those crevices. I also sprayed the head in preparation for her new face. A couple of you mentioned in the comments that I should give her a flower pattern on the opposite eye to Iggy so that they are mirror imaged. Super cute idea. I was feeling confident that day, so I dove straight in with my highly pigmented black watercolor pencils to sketch out the eye lines and lashes. Like with her sister, the eyelashes become leaf stems in the design. And I'm pleased to say the normal eyelashes came out pretty good this time. You know how you have good art days and bad art days? That was a really good art day. With the lines in place, I sketch on the colors. I use a cream pencil for the eye whites and highlighting this time. She's also getting foresty green eyes and a sunset colored flower design. Usually I just cover the eyes and lips. It was fun to go bigger and draw a much larger design over the face. I outline and fill in the lips before spraying the face with fresh sealant. Each layer of sealant will hold down the pigments and provide more tooth for your pencils to grab. I layer up the yellow on the petals and draw a dark red outline around the flower as well. It needed more contrast around the flower. I also tried building up her teeth color. With all the colors in place, it's basically pulling out the lighter colors and pushing back the darker colors from here on out. And decided to burst out the acrylic paints to really saturate those eyes. You can also lift watery pigment straight off the pencils to do some shading. I kept hoping I could save them, but these eyebrows just look terrible. It gives her this expression like, so we're going to wipe them down with acetone and patch things up. I intended for her to match with Iggy's eyebrows, but it seems natural brows just suit this doll much better. One last spray of the sealant and her new face is complete! Yay! When I came up with Iggy, I did a couple of sketches and a lot of the ideas went unused. Mainly the long bushy hair and mushroom hat. So I'm heavily basing our current doll on this sketch here. Someone very honestly pointed out to me in the comments that the purpose of the Stockbox series was to dive into a custom with no plan. And to that I say, you're quite right. We're only, 5 episodes in and I already forgot my own rules? I think because Nova was such a time-wasting disaster, she scared me into planning my characters beforehand. What can I say? I find myself at a cafe, thinking about my next doll, and I almost can't help but sketch things out. But you're right, I promise after this we'll make each Stockbox doll on the spot, as it should be. Thanks for the reminder. Anyway, as you can see, we've cut lengths of acrylic yarn in several variants of green. Because I want a frizzy tight curl, I unravel each length into 3 separate strands. I love that texture. Then, using a large-eyed needle on my reroute tool, I can poke each strand, plug by plug, into the head. You may have noticed I marked where the ears will go so that I don't plug there. Because yarn is more voluminous, I still plug thoroughly around the hairline, but go a little sparser everywhere else. Wow, look at that head of hair! I love it! Now for the shorter haired yarn reroutes, like on Iggy and Ju-on, I didn't bother adding glue on the inside. It's pretty sturdy on its own just because it's a bigger, puffier fiber. But because this reroute is longer and heavier, I'll be painting on a waterproof glue to the inside of her head. I usually use Fabri-Tac, but once you get down to the last inch or so, it's basically a solid. So I'm using something else instead. It was honestly easier to paint this on, and I felt more in control. With that same glue, I'm going to reattach her ears. There we go! Her body mods, recoloring, face up, and reroute are all done. That means it's time for clothes. Obviously, since this is a whole new body type, none of my patterns will work with it, so I'll have to modify one. I suppose that's the downside to making unique body types. You have to come up with new patterns, which is kind of a pain. But I sketched up a rough one and modified it as I went. I cut out my pattern pieces and pop them under my sewing machine. Whenever you're testing out a new pattern, be sure to try it on the doll as you go. I want the dress to look like a bright orange flower, so there are petals along the hem, as well as the roughly petal shape at the sleeves. To add more dimension to the dress, I created a skirt full of gathered petal-shaped pieces of fabric which I cut out in yellow and beige. Taking yellow acrylic paint straight from the tube, I dab on a leafy petal design to each petal of the skirt. It's a simple paint job, but surprisingly effective. For her boots, I cut 2 leaf shapes like this out of felt. I try it on the foot, pin it in place, then sew the sections together. To cover the toes, I cut 2 shapes that roughly look like this. Fold them over the toe, pin, and stitch again. This technique doesn't make super fancy shoes, but it has this charming homemade quality about them. And the felt means it fits to the foot nice and snug, but also tugs off easily. Great shoes to make for beginners, I'd say. I've got to paint mine green to look like leaves because the only felt I had was pink. But it'll look okay. I stitch on a cute flower detail and add laces later on. Cutie booties! Her bag is made of 2 fat crescent moon shapes, a long strip for the bottom, straps, and a few other flourishes. I sketched up several cute potion vials in her design, and I'm going to make them out of a hot glue stick. Whittle them down with an X-Acto knife until they're the right size. Then take a flame to carefully melt the exterior, resulting in a semi-translucent finish. I wish I could take credit for this technique, but I actually saw somebody else do this to make miniature water bottles. I tried to find the video again, but I couldn't find it. I think it was Dinga. To finish, I cut down a cork into smaller corks and stick them in the top. Now they look right. I kept the body separate while I made the clothes, but now we can finally reattach her head. It's good to see her in one piece at last. She's missing her two main accessories, the mushroom hat and her wings. Let's make the hat. Cover the doll in saran wrap to protect the hair. I found this lightweight air-dry clay at my local craft store that somewhat resembled Crayola Model Magic, if you've ever used that. This small pouch was the perfect amount for one mushroom hat. And it even came in orange. We'll just mush it down onto her head there. And gently pinch around the edge to form that subtle curvature of a mushroom cap. Now, using an awl or toothpick, go around the underside and form the gills all the way around. Great! Now we just have to wait for it to dry. Now that it's finally dry, I can paint the underside a creamy white color and add cute spots to the top. I don't expect it to stay on her head by itself, so let's anchor a ribbon in there so that it can tie around her chin. To do this, I essentially made tiny little staples out of wire, inserted them to the inside, then covered everything in a thick layer of glue for good measure. I have a couple more objects to add to the hat, including mini mushrooms and beads. Oh, it's so cute! Let's try it on. It looks great! Now we can style her hair for a more forest spirit vibe. I'm thinking braids, beads, wrapped threads. I just had a lot of fun with it. Now the wings! You'll need wire, a template, fairy film, tiny screws and nuts, permanent marker, parchment paper, an iron, and a candle. I'll be using the same template I made for Iggy. Basically just lay your doll out on a piece of paper and sketch the shapes you want. Reference photos for inspiration. I was inspired by dragonfly wings. The main material I used for the wings is something called fairy film. I've also been told that it goes by unicorn skin, if that helps you find the stuff. It's a beautiful iridescent material that comes in a lot of colors. To complement the orange in my doll's design, I think I'll give her a pair of bluish wings. First, unroll and cut a length of wire approximately the size of the wing. Curl the ends into loops to finish the wing. I cut an additional bit of wire for detail. The rest of the veins will be drawn on last. If your loopy ends don't want to stay together, wrap around and tie them together with a thread. We don't want it slipping around. Take your film and cut a piece large enough to fold over and envelop the whole wing. Take it to your ironing board, place your wire frame inside the film, and then place a piece of parchment paper on top. Set your iron to a medium-lowish heat, mine is on the wool setting, and press the wing firmly. I also flip it and do the other side. Trim the excess, leaving about 5 millimeters outside the wire. Light your candle and carefully burn the edge. Practice on an excess piece first to get the feel for how it melts. Once you're comfortable doing it, you can use the flame to make a tight sealed edge against the wire frame. Using a permanent marker, go back to your template and fill in the finer line. You could have made these lines with more wire if you wanted. However many wires you want to include is up to you, but be aware that if it's too thick, the two sides of the film won't iron together, and you end up with loose air pockets inside the wings. So I prefer to draw on the finer veins with pen. Repeat this until you've got all your wings. I decided to get a little fancy and add an accent panel with acrylic paint. As I was showing this mock-up of how the wing articulation works, I finally realized my error. I was supposed to make a third wire piece that would insert into the doll's back, and the wing pieces should simply end in loops. So for full articulation, this is the wing setup you want. Sorry about that, guys. So now when we assemble the wing like so, we have a wing that can fully fold up and down. That's more like it. Drill 2 holes into your doll's back where you want the wings to go, mix up a little epoxy glue, and stop them in place. I add a small bead of glue on top for good measure. They look so magical! I don't know how she would actually fly with all that hair. Just don't think too hard about it. Now we can play dress up and call this fairy finished. Since we couldn't see Iggy's process, I tried extra hard to make this video a good one to make up for it. I hope you enjoyed seeing our big sister forest fairy come to life. And she needs a name. I think Amanita is the perfect name for her. Amanita muscaria is the scientific name for that classic red and white spotted mushroom, which was obviously the inspiration for the hat. I know Monster High already has an Amanita, beautiful doll by the way, but come on, it's meant to be. Some of you expressed interest in seeing a fall or winter themed fairy, which sounds cool, so maybe next time. I went with the leafy greens again for this doll, mostly because I bought a lot of green yarn for Iggy. And I already drew up the design, of course. As usual, it's a case of so many ideas, so few hours in the day. Even though it was frustrating to lose Iggy's video, if that had not happened, we wouldn't have Amanita. So I'd like to stay positive and think something good came out of it. I think she's a great addition to our growing Stockbox doll family. Click that icon in the top right to vote on the next doll's topic. I can't wait to see what you choose. And click that like button for Amanita and Iggy. And subscribe to the channel to receive notifications when a new video comes out. Thank you so much for watching. Stay artsy. Annyeong!